I wanted to talk about the yeast that I'm going to use in the recipe, because pitas require yeast. So I figured this would be a good time to talk about it. There's two main kinds. There's dry active and instant yeast. There's a slight difference between both of them, but they both do the same job. It's just in how you treat either one of them. We could test to see if the yeast is still good by dissolving some yeast in warm water with some sugar. So we're gonna try that now. It takes about 10 minutes for it to start bubbling and activate and do all the stuff that it needs to do. So yeah, it's gonna be a little bit. But anyhow, we're gonna do some sugar. Half a teaspoon of sugar into half a cup of warm water. The water's got to be warm because the yeast likes the warm water. If it's too hot, the yeast will die. So if you get the water at about like 120 to 140 degrees, which is really hot, you're going to inhibit the growth, and at 140 you kill the yeast off completely. So that you don't want to do that. So the water has to be kind of, just above body temperature, so about 110 degrees or so, 105 to 110 degrees. And we're gonna test this. So imagine like a warm bath kind of thing, and that's how hot you want your water to be. So I'm going to add in a 2.5 teaspoons of the dry yeast into the warm water. It seems like a lot of yeast to use to test something, but if you're going to go through the process of making all this dough, you kind of want to have you want to make sure that your yeast is good. And then I got 2 teaspoons of the instant yeast. We're just going to stir this to kind of dissolve it a little bit. And in about 10 minutes or so, it should start bubbling and foaming and stuff. And if it does that, we know that our yeast is good. And if it doesn't, then our yeast is no good, and you got to get rid of it and go out and get some new stuff, unfortunately. But that's just the way it goes. Okay, so I'm going to give this 10 minutes and we'll come back and see if anything's happened. Okay? Alright. Hey. Alright, so it's been just over 10 minutes, or about 10 minutes. This is the dry active yeast, and it's like really taken off. Tons of bubbles. It's foamy. It smells super yeasty. So I know this stuff is going to work. So that's good. And then we have the instant, and it's also bubbled up quite a bit. It smells kind of yeasty, not as much as that stuff there, but this is good too, so I'll be able to use either one of these. The instant yeast, you can just add it directly to your flour mixture. You don't have to dissolve it in water, and it'll do what it needs to do. The dry active yeast, or the traditional yeast, or whatever it's called, needs to be dissolved in water first before you add it to your mix. So they are interchangeable. You can use one or the other. It doesn't really matter. You just might need to use more or less depending. So if it's if you have the dry yeast and it's calling for instant yeast, you're going to use 25% more of this, the dry yeast. And if you have if it calls for dry and all you have is instant, then you're just going to use 25% less instant. Most of the packets that it says, whenever it says a packet of yeast, is 2.25 teaspoons of yeast. So there's that. The sugar that I added in here, that's what's creating all this, right? The yeast are waking up. They're feeding on the sugar, they're giving off carbon dioxide, and that's going to help proof our bread, right? It's going to give it lift and make it super delicious. Yeah. Okay, so this is the difference between the two in size. So this is the dry active, and you can see how large the granules are. And then over here is the instant yeast, and it's super fine. Okay, so that's just going to dissolve in the flour mixture and all that other stuff when we're making our bread. But then the big stuff over here has to be dissolved in the water first. Yeah, so that's what the two different yeasts look like.